Imagine waking up one day to a nationwide financial crisis, just sheer chaos, uncertainty, only to realize it's actually just the start, just the beginning of understanding something, well, much deeper, a societal challenge. That's pretty much where our deep dive begins today. We're plunging into Daksh Tyagi's book, A Nation of Idiots, an Indian citizen's guide on how to avoid a nation of idiots.
And it's definitely provocative. This really isn't just a book, It's more like a journey. Documented meticulously, it follows the author's own observations, his experiences, and he's trying to uncover these collective blind spots, these unexamined traditions, the strategic games people play, things that subtly but really profoundly shape a whole society. So our mission today for you is to kind of collaboratively pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge from this stack of insights. It's quite something. We'll explore his main argument, right? That a collective of heads influences our lives for the worse. That it confuses us, leads us down the wrong path, and expects this kind of blind obedience.
We're going to unpack how these idiocies, as he calls them, actually show up, from personal choices right up to national policy.
Yeah, and what really stands out, I think, is the author's unique way of doing it. He takes these very personal anecdotes. Sometimes they're even quite funny, actually. And he manages to turn them into these universal lessons. It's quite skillful. He's essentially offering us a shortcut, a way to get informed about these complex, often hidden forces playing out in society, particularly in India, yes, but honestly, the implications go way beyond that. So we're going to try and connect these dots that might seem separate at first, help you understand not just what happened in these stories he tells, but crucially, why it matters on a bigger scale and what it really means for all of us just trying to navigate this complex world.
Okay, so let's really unpack this, starting with the author's own experience. It kicks the book off November 8th, 2016. He and his wife had just got back to Sydney, and they'd had a truly awful day. Car broke down, someone tried to mug them, just terrible. They walk into their home, exhausted, right? Only to get hit with the news. 86% of India's currency was being demonetized. Just like that. He actually compares that initial hysteria, the shock of it all, to 9/11 in terms of its immediate, deep, nationwide impact.
That's a powerful comparison.
Yeah, the sheer scale affecting, 1 billion people? It just left him stunned. He says it made his own nightmare day feel like just a blip in comparison. It's hard to even imagine that level of collective societal shock, really.
Absolutely. And that initial shockwave, that's really where the author starts peeling back the layers. It's the starting point. A key thing he reveals is how this immediate sweeping change just exposed almost brutally the country's reliance on what he calls black money. Cash that leaves no proof, never makes the entry of a ledger or the inside of a bank. For anyone familiar with India's parallel economy, the author shows just how ingrained this untaxed cash really was. It was everywhere, he says, but nobody would admit to having it, often hoarded in, rubber-banded stacks. He describes it quite vividly. So demonetization, it wasn't just about swapping old notes for new ones. Not at all. It effectively forced this massive nationwide audit. And it brought up a much more complex and frankly terrifying question for a lot of people.
Right.
How do you explain large cash deposits to the taxman without, revealing potentially years of undeclared income?
Right. Suddenly everyone's got questions to answer.
Exactly. It was this moment of forced transparency. And it cut across everyone. Individuals, companies, political groups, even religious figures. Everyone had to deal with these new, very strict rules for exchanging the cash.
And the author's personal reaction to this? It was almost immediate and maybe a bit extreme. His wife certainly thought so. He decided right there and then he had to go to India. His mission, to change mindsets.
Wow, that's ambitious.
Yeah, ambitious is one word for it. A noble idea maybe, but his wife apparently called it the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Pillow throwing was involved, apparently.
Light chuckle.
But, his determination, as the book shows, was definitely stronger than any marital skepticism. So once he got to India, he started meticulously noting things down, observing how it all unfolded, and the initial behaviors he saw, absolutely wild, and, clear signs of what he later called idiocy. For instance, just 6 hours after the announcement on November 8th, jewelers sold 15 tons of gold. 15 tons, worth around 5,000 crores. Why? Because people were scrambling, almost frantically, to turn their now suspect cash into something solid.
Into gold, the classic move.
Exactly. Gold prices shot up 40-60% pretty much overnight.
Yeah, that immediate, almost desperate rush for gold. It's such a powerful indicator, isn't it, of a society under huge financial and psychological pressure. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, these frantic reactions, they weren't just isolated things. They immediately highlighted and exposed these underlying systems. The author noted the quick market impact too. The BSE, Sensex, Nifty, they all fell sharply, about 6%, which, as he dryly notes, meant people with money are the first to run. No surprise there, perhaps.
Right. Get out while you can.
And the crisis also, quite starkly, exposed numerous dummy companies, shell companies. He details one case. The top one had over 2,134 bank accounts.
Yeah.
Another had 900. Yet, mysteriously, no owners found.
Convenient.
Very convenient. And as the author subtly points out, this raises a lot of questions about who is really behind these complex financial structures. It points to this deep architecture of, well, illicit finance.
And then you had the sheer political theater of it all, just pure performance. The author describes an opposition leader making this huge public show of queuing up to exchange just 4,000 euro, bringing, as he puts it, the press, cheerleaders, balloons and all. Just ridiculous.
For 4,000 rupees?
Exactly, only to walk out later with his new notes. It wasn't genuine solidarity, obviously. It was a performance, an act of being part of the mob, trying to look like he was sharing the pain, rather than actually addressing the crisis or its effects.
Classic political maneuvering.
Yeah.
Using a crisis for PR. It happens everywhere.
Absolutely. And the revelations just kept coming beyond the political stuff. The author saw how quickly certain religious institutions jump on the bandwagon.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, he details guardians of certain religious institutions starting to launder money. There was one Mathura priest caught on a news expose converting 50 lakhs. That's 5 million rupees of black money for a 20% commission.
Wow. 20% cut.
Yeah. That detail is pretty jarring, isn't it? Shows how even supposedly sacred spaces got tangled up in these illicit financial flows.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How quickly do established norms, even illegal or, frankly, unethical ones, get exposed or adapted when a sudden systemic shock like demonetization hits?
It's a stress test for society, in a way.
Definitely. And the digital trail was just as revealing. Top Google searches included how to convert black money into white, which the author points out was a huge missed opportunity for tax rates, based on IP addresses.
They could have just followed the searches.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And even more comically, a similar but misinformed search for how to convert black into white mainly led people to skin fairness cream.
Oh, no. Seriously?
Yeah.
Seriously. The panic was just so widespread. It led to both ingenious and, well, completely absurd attempts to get around the new rules, blurring the lines between serious financial maneuvering and just utter ridiculousness.
And beyond these, broad societal reactions, the book shares some really fascinating personal stories. Individuals trying to outthink the system, often with disastrous results, sometimes quite heartbreaking. Let's take Kareem. Remember him? The ceramics trader.
Right, the train tickets guy.
Exactly. He hears the news, thinks he's got this brilliant plan. Buys 6 months worth of train tickets, 12 tickets, so launder 50,000 rupees. Felt like a genius, he said. Then he ropes in his wife, his brother, friends, gets them to buy even more tickets under fake names, planning to get refunds later when things calm down.
It sounds kind of clever initially, on the surface.
It does, but Kareem's story is just a perfect example of how quickly these initially clever individual attempts to bypass the system become visible.
Yeah.
And then get shut down.
Right, the system adapts. Totally. His plan was incredibly short-lived. The government quickly put a cap on cash sales for tickets 10,000 rupees, and crucially, they brought in a rule requiring a tax card, a PAN card, for any refunds.
Game over.
Pretty much. He ended up losing most of his money, and as he told the author, he was forced to stay in his exhausting job because of it. Couldn't quit like he'd hoped.
So he lost his dream, really, not just the cash.
Exactly. It's such a clear illustration of how the system closes loopholes, often hitting those trying to game it the hardest, turns a supposedly smart play into a major personal loss.
Then you have Sumit, the ideas man from Meerut. He found this almost mythical back door at his local bank, had a connection with the manager.
Right, the bank manager connection.
Yeah. He used this to exchange cash, taking a 20% commission, and apparently made more money in a few hours than he had in 10 years.
Can you even imagine that sudden flood of illicit cash?
It's wild, and word spread like wildfire, apparently. He was just inundated with requests, became this accidental, short-lived black market financier.
And what's so fascinating there is how quickly everyone adapted, not just the individuals like Sumit or the crook in the bank, as the author calls him, but the system itself reacted fast, too. Sumit's little scheme got dramatically shut down when the bank literally sealed the back door.
Sealed it up.
Yeah. And significantly, they introduced indelible ink, put ink on people's fingers to stop them doing multiple exchanges.
Ah, the purple finger. I remember that.
Exactly. So suddenly, Sumit's trapped in this massive queue like everyone else, losing his profits, facing, as the book says, particularly abusive and aggressive clients demanding their money back. His story just perfectly shows that entrepreneurial spirit, maybe twisted by the crisis, getting instantly cut short by these swift official measures.
Yeah, he went from dreaming of this self-made future to apparently scrubbing his finger raw, trying to get the ink off. All in a few days. It's a powerful, almost tragicomic example of a very rapid rise and fall.
And we can't forget Amar, the public servant with what the author calls blacker money, untaxed bribes. His story really paints a picture of just how desperate and, frankly, how misinformed some of these reactions were.
What did he do again?
He made this incredibly risky move, bought gold after demonetization, paying a 60% premium. 60%.
Ouch. That's panic buying.
Pure panic, surely. And he hid it under his kitchen slab. Can you picture that?
Wow. So what happened? Did he get away with it?
Not even close. It's not just about Amar's personal loss, which was huge. Over half his ill-gotten gains just vanished. What's critical here, what the author really highlights, is how these frantic, almost mob-like decisions ripple outwards.
Right, the broader impact.
Exactly. Amar then panicked again after hearing a rumor about a potential gold limit. So he was forced to sell his gold, this time at a 30% discount below market value. Why? Because nobody wanted to buy black gold without proper receipts.
Ah, so he was stuck.
Completely stuck. In the end, he lost a staggering 16,87,000 rupees on his initial 30 lakh investment.
That's a massive loss.
Huge. And it makes you ask that important question the author raises. Beyond the individual loss, how do these kinds of frantic, uninformed decisions affect wider market stability, public trust, especially during a crisis?
Yeah, it destabilizes markets, definitely erodes public trust when you need it most, and it just reveals a society fractured by opportunism and fear. These stories together just paint this vivid picture of the chaos, both individual and systemic, that demonetization unleashed.
So the author, watching all this happen, he comes to this really profound realization. While everyone else was obsessing over, who knew what, when, and how do I get rid of these old notes, the government, he realized, was actually trying to outthink those who followed blindly. They were looking for cues where there should be none. They weren't just reacting. They were strategically watching, anticipating, maybe even leveraging the chaos.
That's a crucial turning point in his argument, isn't it? Because if you connect that to the bigger picture, the nation of idiots wasn't just, individuals acting selfishly on the street. It really started higher up with the rich. After the announcement, all their untaxed income was suddenly dangerously exposed.
Right, vulnerable.
Exactly. So they initiated these sophisticated, often elaborate money laundering schemes, opening accounts for employees, backdating invoices, forging salary slips, making money hop through a dozen accounts before sneakily coming back to theirs. And when even that wasn't enough, the author notes, they deliberately spread rumors and fear to create widespread panic. Why? Because panic gave them opportunities to clear out their dungeons of cash.
So they weaponized fear itself.
Pretty much. This wasn't just small tricks anymore. It involved things like floating bags of cash down the Ganges, laundering money through religious places, even dramatically burning bags of cash in posh neighborhoods, just desperate to erase the evidence.
And what's really compelling is how these ways of the rich became infectious.
Ah, the trickle-down effect of bad behavior.
Exactly. We, the ordinary citizens, started hiding away our second-hand bag or worrying about our few 500 or 1,000 notes, believing, almost irrationally, that someone was coming after us. We completely forgot, as the author starkly reminds us, that while hundreds died during the demonetization period, thousands would die later from the cold winter because we did nothing for the ones in need.
This is a sobering point.
Yeah. We walked out with our new notes, sure, but as the author puts it, with real punch, we were the same old idiots. We totally missed the forest for the trees, focused on our own small losses, ignoring the huge societal cost.
And the author's conclusion on this whole period is pretty stark. He says the real danger of a nation of idiots is how quickly it can grow its numbers, how millions get enlisted almost overnight. He argues it was because of this collective behavior, this nation of idiots, this self-serving panic and apathy, that India, as he puts it, failed as a country during those months, lost sight of basic human compassion in the rush for individual gain or just perceived security.
So bringing it all together, what's the big takeaway here as the author sees it? He concludes, and it's a heavy line, quote, "Because we acted like them, that the demonetization period will always be remembered as the demonization of us."
Wow. Demonization of us.
Yeah. It wasn't just a financial policy that demonetized currency. It was this profound societal event that demonized, or maybe just revealed the demon within, a collective population. It was like holding up a mirror, reflecting these deep societal flaws and the unsettling ease with which people can be swayed into self-serving, ultimately harmful collective actions, all while being expertly distracted from the bigger picture.
Okay, so moving beyond that immediate crisis, the author then dives deep into what he calls the blueprint of conformity, shaping the ideal Indian man. And he starts with this incredible pressure to conform, right down to your very identity, your name.
Yeah, the naming thing is fascinating. He shares his own story of being born 5 times through name changes. It's quite something. Started with a loudly pronounced name from a pundit, then one his 4-year-old sister made up, which he describes as a type of an epic rat for kindergarten. Can you imagine?
Chuckles mortifying.
Absolutely. Then for boarding school, his uncle names him Rishab, meaning a bull. Finally, he insisted on Daksh, meaning to strive for perfection, only to end up being called Phil, short for father-in-law, because his science teacher linked Daksh to Lord Shiva.
It's quite a linguistic roller coaster.
It really is. And what truly stands out here is how this early, almost constant conditioning teaches you the value of the label over its actual meaning.
Right. The name itself becomes more important than what it signifies.
Exactly. It's almost like your connection to your own identity gets stripped away for societal acceptance, or even just to avoid being made fun of like he was. The author reflects that despite all the thought put into the label, the meaning behind what they were supposed to do, what they were supposed to follow, often didn't matter as much.
Yeah, that really makes you think, doesn't it? How does this pervasive culture of naming and renaming, this constant redefinition, reflect a deeper societal need? Maybe for external validation, for fitting into these preset molds, rather than encouraging genuine self-discovery. He mentions other things too, like being told to hate Pakistan in boarding school or having to drink milk, all without much explanation, just blind obedience expected.
It's like a foundational lesson in conformity right from the start.
And this cultural conditioning, this expectation of just accepting things without question, it leads directly to what the author calls the good bacteria defense. Yeah. This phrase became his shorthand for any explanations that made no sense, usually about religion, traditions, rituals, things you just weren't supposed to question.
Right, and he illustrates this with a really vivid and frankly kind of stomach-churning story about his childhood friend Tanmay's family.
Oh yeah, the Godman story.
That's the one. They had a godman visit, and Tanmay's father and others did this ritual washing the godman's feet in a container. Okay, weird, but maybe traditional. But then it gets stranger. The family pours the preacher's feet water into these fancy silver-coated glasses.
Oh, no.
And then, with what the author calls possessed enthusiasm, they drank it. The dirty feet water.
Ugh. The imagery is just powerful.
It is, and it's such a striking example of the absurdity that can happen when belief just completely overrides logic.
That anecdote perfectly shows how, as the author puts it, the Indian man does not understand the scriptures he follows, but crucially feels he must defend his irrational belief system and these illogical rituals no matter what.
Defense mode kicks in.
Exactly. When the author, as a kid, dared to question the dirty water and the obvious bacteria on his feet, Tanmai's father didn't give a logical reason. He just dismissed it, said it was good bacteria.
Good bacteria.
Yeah. The response wasn't based on reason at all. It was rooted in this unshakable, unquestioning belief. It's all about believing, not questioning, nodding, not understanding, and enduring awkward silences or even getting hostility if you dare challenge the norm. This good bacteria defense becomes his powerful metaphor for any explanation that puts blind faith and conformity above basic reason.
So bringing that together, the bigger implication is pretty stark, isn't it? It's about maintaining conformity, whatever the cost, even if it means drinking feet water and silencing that little voice inside saying, hang on a minute.
Yeah, it really lays bare how deep that pressure runs, even into things like personal hygiene and just basic logic. It's not just a funny story. It's about a fundamental societal mechanism.
And this drive to conform, this unquestioning acceptance, leads the author to point out this simple misunderstanding of complex systems, especially confusing Sanskar, which is values, with Sanskriti, which is culture. He says we mix them up all the time.
Right. And he illustrates this brilliantly. Using a woman looking in a mirror. It's a really easy way to grasp it. He breaks it down, and it's quite insightful.
Yeah, go through it. It's good.
Okay, so lots of people looking in a mirror, that's just a habit. Her looking every single morning, that becomes a custom. Lots of people doing it for years. That's a practice. When you feel you can't leave the house without looking. Now it's a tradition.
Okay, that progression makes sense. Habit to tradition.
Exactly. But this framework, it's incredibly insightful because it shows how easily practices can morph into these rigid, unquestioned beliefs, almost without anyone noticing the shift.
Yeah.
And then he pushes it even further to really make the point. If mirrors are set up everywhere and you're told God will stripe you if you don't look, and washing before looking becomes mandatory, and mirrors become tax deductible,
Then it's religion.
exactly. Then it becomes religion. And if you can't stand mirrors made by a different brand, that's communalism. He then uses the same powerful framework to define other terms. Society. People who look down on you for not looking in the mirror. Chauvinism. A woman can't look during her period. Politicians. Exploiting brand loyalty for votes. Godmen. Claiming to see more than just their reflection. Fanatics. So in love with their own reflection, they see nothing else.
Wow. That really forces you to think about how easily customs get elevated into these moral imperatives, doesn't it?
Completely. It shows how most of us confuse Sanskrit values
Yeah.
with Sanskriti culture. And in doing that, we lose the original meaning, the flexibility of real values.
Now, we often, and maybe understandably, blame Bollywood for a lot of societal chauvinism, for perpetuating stereotypes, problematic norms.
Yeah, I get blamed a lot.
But the author challenges this. He argues a more nuanced point. He says, art imitates life, sure. But when art imitates other art that imitates life in another country, is this art anything more than an imitation?
That's an interesting twist.
Yeah, he's asking if Bollywood is really the creator of the sexism, or is it just reflecting what's already there?
It's a really critical distinction he's making. He gives examples from films like a serial killer targeting the best people, but with no logical reason given for who's best. Or even more disturbingly, a rape victim being forced to marry her rapist. These absurd customs, this questionable morality, yes, it's reflected in cinema.
Definitely.
However, the author then brings in this powerful historical observation from India's glorious freedom struggle, as he puts it. He notes that in the crowds listening to famous leaders speaking against injustice for rights, there were maybe two in a crowd of hundreds of women.
Yeah.
2 women.
That few, really.
That's what he observes. The vast majority of women could not step outside the house unescorted. It highlights this incredibly restrictive societal norm back then. Practices like public shaming, female infanticide, dowry, sati, child marriage. They weren't just present, they were alarmingly common.
So his point is,
His point is that this historical context suggests we have always been sexist. Bollywood, then, is just the medium to which we can point as a visible symptom. The films are a reflection, he argues, not the origin of the problem. A powerful mirror to existing societal norms, however problematic or uncomfortable they are to face. Okay, let's shift our focus now to the gender divide. An unfortunate and deplorable state within India, as the author titles it. He argues that the modern Indian woman is offered, in his words, a too limited a menu, forcing her to choose between traditional, modern, traditional, and traditional, modern. It sounds like variations on the same theme, really.
yeah, not much real choice there.
Right. He suggests what she truly wants are the specials at a completely different restaurant, implying her choices are often preset, unsatisfying, and just severely restrictive. It's a strong metaphor for limited agency.
And this limited menu idea, it's brutally backed up by statistics and some deeply disturbing social realities he presents. The annual economic survey findings he cites reveal this truly unfortunate state. Over 63 million fewer women than there should be in the country. 63 million missing women, that number is just staggering.
It is, and it's not just a number. It points directly to the devastating results of sex-selective abortions. The chilling fact that families are more likely to stop having kids once a son is born, and that girls systematically get less education, worse nutrition, significantly less medical care. Most strikingly, the author points out, over 21 million Indian girls are considered not wanted by their families.
1 million.
Unwanted.
It's heartbreaking. And this isn't just a problem for the poor or uneducated. He details how even educated, wealthy women face intense pressure, especially from mothers-in-law, to produce sons. The fact that sex-selective abortions happen even among high-income Indian parents living abroad, like in England, shows just how deep these biases run. Wealth and education don't automatically erase these ingrained cultural expectations. And to bring this chilling reality home, the author shares some really poignant case studies, starting with Samarth, who he calls the obedient son. Samarth's mother spent 4 years searching for a bride for him, even after he'd actually exchanged rings and booked a honeymoon with someone.
4 years, while he was basically engaged.
Yeah. The wedding ultimately fell through. Not because of Samarth or the bride, but because his mother had a very specific type. The bride was described as sweet and fair, and an only child to a public-listed company, which, sounds like a great catch on paper, right? Ticks all the boxes.
He's ideal, yeah.
But his family wanted a proper wedding, which Samarth painfully explained meant a very specific and substantial amount of dowry.
The dowry demand.
Exactly. He even showed the author a WhatsApp group where a marriage broker posted a woman's photo with details, 26 dark family money, will pay, quote. And his mother's response, just 2 words, how dark.
Wow, how dark. That just says it all, doesn't it?
It really does. It encapsulates the systemic prejudice so starkly.
Yeah, this story makes you ask, how do these deep-seated societal expectations, often disguised as just tradition or preference, end up dictating life-altering decisions like marriage? How do they perpetuate gender bias, even among educated, seemingly modern families? Samarth's painful experience just shows how deeply entrenched the dowry system still is, how a woman's value can be shockingly reduced to a list of attributes and a quote, rather than her worth as a person or, actual love or partnership.
And the mother's casual, chilling question. It speaks volumes about how caste, class, and skin color intersect as deciding factors in the Indian marriage market, reducing people to commodities.
Then there's that incredibly complex and disturbing story of Ramesh and Shefali, the one the author calls the well-intentioned rapist. It's a truly convoluted story.
Yeah, it's a lot. So Ramesh loved Shefali, but they had to break up. His parents insisted he marry a South Indian bride. Classic family pressure. Later, Ramesh finds out Shefali's having an affair with a colleague. And consumed by rage, maybe betrayal, he calls her husband to expose it.
Okay, messy already.
Very. Then, in a moment of desperation, maybe cowardice, Shefali falsely accuses Ramesh of attempted rape. Claims she refused his advances.
And what's profoundly unsettling and really insightful here is the tangled legal mess the author exposes, and the weaponization of relationships and accusations that follows. Ramesh gets fired, gets jailed unjustly for 8 days, even though investigations eventually find him innocent of attempted rape.
So he was cleared.
Of attempted rape, yes. But the legal nightmare wasn't over. Under a 2017 law, Shefali's lawyer argued that even consensual sex could be considered rape if a man knows that he is not the husband of the woman.
Wait, consensual sex becomes rape? How?
It's a twisting of the law, seemingly. To avoid years in prison, Ramesh was basically forced to pay a huge settlement. But the story keeps going. Her colleague then sends intimate pictures of Shefali to her husband.
Oh my God.
Yeah, the husband files for divorce, somehow gets Ramesh's settlement money back, and then incredibly sues her former employer and Shefali. She gets fired too when her colleague, ironically, accuses her of abusing her power for sex.
It's just a tangled web of disaster.
Completely. This whole chain of events just makes you wonder about the intersection of personal morality, legal loopholes, societal pressures, gender dynamics in these incredibly sensitive situations, and the tragic, devastating fallout for everyone involved. The author's final comment on this story is simple but powerful. Idiots have no gender.
And finally, in a section he calls Social Clockwork, we hear about Chef, a woman living in Mumbai, a city often seen as more progressive.
Right.
Chef initially believed dowry was a problem of the 90s, outdated, didn't happen in chill Mumbai, until she was confronted with stats showing it's actually increasing there.
That highlights a common thing, doesn't it? That you won't see a beggar from my community kind of defense.
Yeah.
People being willfully blind to issues affecting others, or even their own community if it doesn't fit their narrative or touch them directly.
Exactly. And this is a critical observation. It shows how women experience a very different social reality, even in supposedly progressive urban places, underscoring the subtle but pervasive nature of gendered expectations. Chef then shares her own experience of this social clockwork, these constant, relentless reminders about her kids and duties. Don't forget you have kids, people say. Colleagues, everyone, when she works late or travels for business.
Just for working.
Yeah. Meanwhile, her husband, who has the exact same number of kids, faces zero such pressure, no unsolicited reminders.
Wow. The double standard.
It's so clear. It subtly but powerfully shows how women are often treated like they have social amnesia, constantly needing reminders about their roles. While men's work lives are seemingly unburdened by these domestic expectations, it's a systemic gendered bias baked right in.
In reflecting on these personal stories and the wider issue of gender inequality, the author recounts this childhood memory. It serves as a really powerful analogy. He was 13, learning to drive his grandfather's old car. It didn't have a brick for the handbrake, and he was on a steep slope.
Oh, I remember this bit. Scary situation for a kid.
Totally. He slams on the brakes, stops the car halfway down, but he's too scared to let go. Doesn't know how to move forward safely. His sister and cousin go off looking for another brick, leaving him there alone, holding the car still, just paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. It's such a relatable moment of childhood panic.
It really is. And this analogy, as the author presents it, it perfectly explains why Indian men, much like that frightened kid in the car, don't know how to take it forward, and so we keep it from moving.
Because they're afraid.
Exactly, because we are afraid of where it might lead if we let go. They actively look for and find these bricks of religion, history, and precedents to make sure this issue remains halted in its tracks.
So it's not just apathy, it's active resistance.
That's what he argues. It's not just inaction. It's this deep-seated, almost paralyzing fear of change. Fear of the unknown consequences of real gender equality.
It perfectly encapsulates that unfortunate state of women stemming directly from this profound, often unspoken resistance to progress. It's like a collective foot jammed on the brake, making sure the car doesn't move.
Okay, now we shift to what the author calls the deplorable state of women. And this begins with that deeply problematic term, Eve teasing.
Yeah, that term itself is loaded.
Right. This umbrella term used for harassment, assault in public spaces. It's deplorable because it immediately, almost unconsciously, implies that Eve, the first woman, the temptress from religious stories, is somehow to blame.
Like it's her fault.
Exactly. It suggests Eve's nature of being a temptress is making the Indian man helpless, shifting the blame straight from the perpetrator to the victim. This even led to things like the Delhi Prohibition of Eve Teasing Bill 1984. The title itself, when you look at it that way, is problematic.
That's such a crucial point. It really forces you to ask, how does the very language we use to define a problem subtly shift blame? And in doing so, perpetuate victim blaming instead of holding perpetrators fully responsible. It's like a linguistic symptom of a much deeper systemic societal issue. Building on this, the author introduces Anamika, a journalist. She reveals how news channels face this issue of audience indifference, even to the staggering numbers, 800-plus rapes, 1,000-plus sexual assaults reported per week.
Those numbers should shock everyone, every week.
They should. But facing indifference, the channels actively look for sensational angles, religious, communal, class, anything, to make these horrific stories newsworthy and grab fleeting attention. But then, she says, they get mouth parts.
Mouth farts. Chuckles slightly. Okay, yeah.
Deeply disturbing, but shockingly profitable, controversial comments from politicians.
And these mouth farts, they are truly shocking, aren't they? Almost unbelievable. An MP from Uttar Pradesh actually stated, quote, "Rape is a social crime which depends on men and women. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong."
He actually said, sometimes it's right.
That's the quote. Another politician advised, seriously it seems, women should not venture out in the dark. Helpful. And maybe the most absurd but widely reported one, a Kap Panchayat leader claimed, "Chow man, it leads to hormonal imbalance, evoking an urge to indulge in acts such as rape and sex."
Chow mein. Seriously, it's almost comical if it weren't so tragically misinformed and dangerous.
They are indeed shocking. And Anamika's insight is that these mouth farts, they don't just distract, they derail an entire news narrative.
That's so.
They cause the audience to forget the victim. These outrageous comments become the entire focus, leading to outrage, demands for apologies, endless secondary news cycles, while the original crime, the victim suffering, just fades tragically into the background.
So the distraction works.
Exactly. The news channels, according to Anamika, know this works and they exploit it, which makes you wonder, how can citizens possibly stay focused on the victim, on the core issues of violence, when media and politicians deliberately manipulate narratives for profit and, frankly, just distraction?
It's a cynical and deeply damaging feedback loop.
So, given all this, what's the bigger picture about the news machine itself? What's the takeaway?
Anamika reveals a really disturbing reality. She says, news channels hold women's empowerment events, but the news is designed specifically for men. Why? Because advertisers pay for a male audience. She even shares something her boss, an editor, apparently said with chilling clarity: men make better experts, women make better victims.
Wow. That's bleak.
It is. It exposes this calculated dehumanization, this manipulation baked into the news machine, where tragedies turn into a commodity and gender roles are rigidly reinforced, all for profit.
Then we hear from Nisha, a coder, and she proposes this seemingly counterintuitive, almost provocative idea.
Right, the virgin's idea.
Yeah. She suggests looking into the number of rapes committed by virgins to tackle the staggering 110 rapes reported daily in India. Initially, people pushed back, were confused. But her point, she argues, is fundamental. Unless we head toward zero, we're never going to get there. She wants to understand a specific, often overlooked part of the problem, one that challenges the usual assumptions about who perpetrators are.
And she shares a really shocking story to back this up. A woman she knows was nearly raped by a 30-year-old colleague who, incredibly, had never had sex and had never interacted with a woman before.
Never interacted with a woman.
Apparently. This man, who on paper was a good son, a hard worker, didn't fit the typical media image of a criminal at all. Yet he was one. This story profoundly highlights a deep societal failure to address sexual health, education, healthy gender interaction. Nisha argues that in Indian society, parents protect a girl, but they defend a boy.
Protect versus defend. That's interesting.
Yeah. And when they grow up, the rules of society will defend the boy who becomes a man. But the girl who becomes a woman will need protection from the man. It's a stark societal contract, she describes. She also powerfully challenges the idea that rape is separate from religion or community. She asks why there's often more public outrage if an outsider rapes a woman than if an insider does.
Exposing the bias.
Exactly. Exposing the underlying communal and religious biases in how these horrific crimes are seen and reacted to, which only makes accountability and justice even harder to achieve.
Okay, moving into inheriting ideas. From family to society, the author asks this critical question. Do we actually raise our kids? Or is society, through its ingrained structures, just molding them, using what he calls a social Indian database?
A database. What does he mean by that?
He means the system that instantly categorizes people just by their full name, dictating everything from their likely profession to dowry demands, even their level of hatred with ours, reducing a person to just a category in a catalog. It's a chilling thought, isn't it, that your identity is so prepackaged?
It is chilling. And what's really fascinating here is his reveal of the no-no list. This secret catalog kept in the family heads, meticulously passed down through generations, outlining which communities children absolutely must not fall in love with or marry.
A literal list of forbidden loves.
Pretty much. And the reasons for these lists can be completely trivial, irrational even. Like Amrita Sar, who rejected an entire tribe and updated her social database just because one man from that group burped in her face on a train once.
Because of a burp? Seriously.
Years later, when her daughter Udi falls for a man from these burping folk, Amrita unleashes the unreasonables, the family elders, who bombard her with case studies of intercaste, intercommunity, marital disasters, all designed to force her to conform.
Wow. Full court press.
Totally. This system, the author argues powerfully, reduces a person to a category than a catalog, severely limiting choices, aggressively reinforcing the status quo, creating what he calls an Amrita virus that spreads intolerance and blind prejudice down the generations. It really makes you think about how deeply ingrained these unexamined biases become, shaping not just individual choices but entire social structures and personal destinies.
The author's own father gave him this piece of advice that really shaped his early life. Question everything.
That's good advice.
Yeah, great advice. Given during a childhood argument about eating eggs, it led the young author to constantly challenge authority, question the norms around him. However, he makes this rather sad observation later on that adulthood dulled my thirst for answers, gradually leading to this acceptance of things not understood. A stark contrast to a child's natural, boundless curiosity.
It's almost a warning, isn't it, about how easily we lose that critical edge.
It is a potent warning, and this is where it gets really interesting. He shares this vivid, almost funny anecdote about his 7th grade history teacher. The teacher corrects his answer that Gandhi was born in Gujarat, insisting, rigidly, it was Bombay presidency.
Technically correct, maybe, but pedantic.
Right. But the child author, with that innocent kid logic, questions back. If Mahatma Gandhi was not born in Gujarat, why on earth did they make Gujarat a dry state?
Jekyll's a brilliant question. Undermines the whole point.
Exactly. It perfectly illustrates the child's innate curiosity, that desire for logical consistency, versus the adult's reluctance to ask questions that might get them into trouble.
Yeah, the system teaches you not to rock the boat.
Precisely. The system, through school reports, societal pressures, it prefers to bring up flowers, conditioning people to conform, not think critically, leading to a society where we often accept things only because the people around us accept them, silencing that vital spark of inquiry.
And the discussion then flows nicely into how we often inherit an idea. Even if its original context is totally gone or irrelevant now. Anaya, a salaried professional, is a perfect example he gives.
Right, the household allowance lady.
That's her. She expects Gar Karch household allowance from her in-laws. Sees it as an entitlement. Why? Simply because her mother, who was a housewife and couldn't work, received it. Anaya and her husband stay in a joint family primarily to avoid gossip in their community, even though she dreams of having her own place. It's such a clear generational disconnect.
It absolutely is. And it's quite revealing, isn't it?
Yeah. This story powerfully shows how a symbol of financial dependence, for one generation, her mother, who often had no choice but to be dependent, becomes this unquestioned entitlement for the next generation. It highlights this critical failure to stop and ask, is this inherited idea still valid? Does it still serve a real purpose in today's world?
Right. Does it still make sense?
Exactly. The author shrewdly points out that Anaya's mother probably would have picked the independence of making her choices over a monthly allowance if she'd had the option.
Yeah.
But for Anaya, it's just this inherited expectation, a norm blindly followed to avoid social criticism, to avoid gossip.
It really makes you consider, how deeply ingrained are these traditions, even when they seem unethical or financially burdensome? And how do we just perpetuate them without thinking critically?
And we see this uncritical following of tradition, even when it's ethically or financially dodgy, so clearly in the cover tradition at weddings.
Ah, yes, the money envelopes.
Exactly. This deeply ingrained protocol where money, usually in specific auspicious amounts, ending in 1, like 101, 1001, is gifted from the bride's family to the groom's family members, just for showing up at the wedding, basically. The author notes the bride's side of the family always ends up losing money.
So the author and his wife found this unethical.
Yes. And in this act of quiet rebellion, they tried to politely return these covers directly to the bride and groom.
And how did that go down?
Not well. It perfectly illustrates what we fail to shrug off, how we cling to these old ways without questioning if they're relevant, fair, or even ethical anymore.
Their polite rebellion was met with instant outrage. The groom's mother apparently called the author stupid and accused him of being offended it wasn't a larger amount.
Wow, defense as much.
Totally. And the bride's mother, just as angry, stated flatly, "You can't question a custom, it is a custom." End of discussion.
The social pressure must have been immense.
Huge. Then, at the reception, they were publicly shamed. Called up on stage and given increased amounts in the envelopes, making sure everyone saw they were forced to take the money. A public performance of conformity.
That's brutal.
It highlights the immense social pressure to conform to traditions, even ones that are costly and ethically dubious, making it incredibly hard for individuals to re-examine their way of life or discard what makes us miserable. It's a powerful example of the collective weight of just unthinking tradition. Okay, now we dive into the nexus, sexuality, politics, and the news machine. This section weaves together some incredibly potent threads of these societal blind spots. The author kicks it off with a really dramatic statement. He imagines a woman from the 11th century stumbles into modern-day India. Okay.
And her immediate visceral reaction is, quote, "You people ruin sex."
Jekyll's, that's quite an opening line.
It is provocative. But he immediately backs it up, contextualizes it through the Khajuraho temples, where he argues there's more sexuality in those bricks than in the bones of our nation.
That's quite a contrast, isn't it? From open eroticism carved in stone to, well, whatever sex in the bones of our nation means today. It implies something hidden, maybe broken.
It does, and it's a stark, almost humorous way to highlight a really serious regression.
Yeah, Aman, a guide at Khajuraho he speaks to, frames it beautifully. Aman notes that in the 11th century, erotic art wasn't hidden away, it was public, even celebrated. Homosexuality was accepted. He contrasts this sharply with 19th century Britain, where homosexuality carried the death penalty, making India back then far more progressive on this front.
So a complete reversal. Exactly. It reveals this profound regression in Indian society's understanding and expression of sexuality, from a secular sexual and spiritual state to one now veiled in religious restrictions, with sex tragically hidden in curtains and whispers. This drastic shift from open appreciation to severe suppression and shame is, as the author calls it, a profound blunder, where the proof of sanity is before us in those ancient stones, but we can't see the truth. It highlights how deeply society has lost touch with its own, more liberal past.
And this profound regression in attitudes, it's perfectly captured in what the author calls the Holy Union dilemma. He shares the story of Pranay, a man waiting for his sister on an arranged marriage date. Pranay insists rather rigidly that marriage is only for reproduction, driven by this fear that soon there won't be enough of us and more of them, this veiled communal anxiety.
Wow. So it's about numbers, not connection?
Pretty much. He adamantly refuses to consider premarital sex because it's not in our religion, displays this visceral horror at the idea of sex being separated from ritual and reproduction.
This vividly shows how sex, in this mindset, gets cuffed to rituals, chained to reproduction, and gagged to God. Yeah. Utterly stripped of its personal, intimate, pleasurable aspects, becoming just a transactional duty.
That's precisely it. And the law's bewildering confusion just makes the societal repression even worse.
How so?
The Khanna family story he tells is heartbreakingly poignant. Their son, Pulkit, bravely comes out as gay to his family on December 12, 2013.
Okay, a big moment for him.
Huge. Tragically, that was the exact same day that Indian courts recriminalized homosexuality, reversing a progressive 2009 ruling. This was before it was legalized again 5 years later.
Oh my God, the timing. Unbelievable.
Can you imagine? This absurd flip-flopping legal stance just highlights the profound instability, the injustice baked into such policies.
It really forces you to ask, why must personal identity, basic human rights, individual freedoms be constantly subjected to political whims and legal uncertainty like this?
The author ironically points out that lawmakers are often past their sexual prime, and the only time they like to encounter the word sex is on a voter database or in bills and acts, not as a lived human experience, making them profoundly out of touch with the very lives they're legislating.
And to really hammer home how deeply misunderstood and, frankly, how absurdly complex these ideas around sexuality have become, the author offers this wonderfully humorous yet sharp analogy. Compares it to a businessman and a politician scenario.
Right, the briefcase analogy.
Exactly. Seduction, he says, is like a briefcase with cash. You're not sure if it's there, but it's exciting. Sex is just taking the money from the briefcase. Sexuality, though, is how you like your money briefcase, plastic bag, etc. Homosexuality, that's liking the briefcase itself. And heterosexuality, liking your money in a plastic bag, but the government just called a ban on those.
Chuckles. It's funny, but it cuts deep.
It does. This analogy, despite the humor, brilliantly shows how deeply misunderstood these concepts are, often leading to what he calls guffed rog hidden diseases, but also that unspoken emotional, psychological distress, and ultimately contributing to a great Indian sexual depression, a society collectively suffocating a fundamental part of being human.
Okay, shifting gears slightly now. The author argues very powerfully that mixing politics and religion is just, well, disastrous.
A toxic mix.
Totally. He uses this compelling analogy, compares religion to bells, peaceful, guiding, an internal code, and politics mixing with religion. That's like claps confronting irregular, shrill, forcing reactions from everyone.
Bells versus claps.
Okay. He shares a personal story from his boarding school back in '95. There were widespread protests for a separate state, forcing a curfew. So the school replaced the calming, scheduled bells that mark the day with sudden, jarring claps for every activity, creating this palpable sense of unease, disruption.
That vivid anecdote really brings the analogy to life, doesn't it? Shows how quickly comfort can turn to pain and disruption. The bells, representing that quiet, internal guidance of religion, were replaced by claps, which were abrupt and sudden, causing discomfort, chaos. When politics merges with religion, he argues, it creates these claps that are confronting, irregular, and shrill, forcing reactions, polarizing society, and inevitably leading to these furious arguments about your God versus my God, your book versus my book, your truth versus my truth.
Divides everyone.
Exactly. This fusion, the author argues, is incredibly dangerous. It riles people up, builds tension, makes it incredibly easy for political parties to exploit faith for their own gain, even to the point of inciting riots, social unrest. It strips religion of its spiritual core and turns it into a political weapon.
Now, for what I found really fascinating and, quite frankly, deeply unsettling, this is where the author meticulously details how political parties use distraction as an opportunity to achieve this monumental, almost stealthy legislative change.
Okay, I remember this part. It's complex but crucial.
Yeah. He sets the scene. March 14th, 2018, he's watching TV. sees politicians protesting outside Parliament, wondering what on earth is happening inside, while the media is totally focused on the outside theatrics.
The protests become the story.
Exactly. This spectacle, he argues, was a carefully orchestrated distraction, a grand illusion.
It's truly a masterclass in political manipulation unfolding over years. The author traces the seeds back to 2010. All political parties, surprisingly, started singing the same tune. NGOs are funded by foreign elements.
The foreign hand argument.
Right. This led to passing the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, SCRA. Controversially, and very suspiciously, it included political parties themselves, which was totally out of character for them. Why would they regulate themselves?
Exactly. The author explains the real motive behind this seemingly unified act was to methodically clear the path for massive foreign direct investment, FDI, and huge land acquisition deals for multinational corporations. NGOs were often inconvenient obstacles to these big projects.
So get the obstacles out of the way.
Precisely. There was already a 1976 law banning foreign funding for politicians, making the new FCRA seem redundant. But its real purpose, he reveals, was to create this illusion of shared regulation while subtly setting the stage for much bigger changes later. It was a strategic long game. And then came what the author calls the harvesting season between 2016 and 2018.
Okay, what happened then?
During this time, NGOs were effectively buried under new regulations, stifling dissent, opposition. Simultaneously, the public was skillfully, strategically distracted. Communal violence flared up in various places designed to keep people agitated, divided, while everyone's attention was glued to that cricket league, that shouting newsreader, that religious issue that did not matter, as the author puts it.
Classic misdirection. Keep people looking over here.
While the real action happens over there, this deliberate chaos created the perfect cover for business with political ties to engage in a feeding frenzy, displacing poor communities, grabbing vast tracts of land for rapid industrialization, development. It's textbook misdirection, isn't it?
It is. And the scale is just staggering. During this harvesting season, FDI shot up, especially in retail and construction, the two industries needing the most land. However, and this is a crucial detail, the author uncovers multinational corporations deposited only token money into Indian banks. Where did the rest go?
Overseas.
The lion's share into overseas accounts. This leads him to a truly shocking revelation. The estimated offshore accounts held by Indian politicians and power brokers grew from an already massive $500 billion USD in 2010 to a mind-boggling $1,500 billion USD by 2018.
$1.5 trillion.
Trillion. To put that in perspective, if divided, every single citizen in India would get 1 lakh rupees in Euro Westing. Adding to this, between 2016 and 2018, over 8,000 multimillionaires, many known political donors, mysteriously migrated overseas, almost as if they were all given the same direction, a collective signal. This is the first hidden half of the magic trick: make vast sums of money parked overseas, out of sight.
And now for what the author dramatically calls the final trick. Pulled off, incredibly, on March 14th, 2018, the very day he was getting his haircut, remember? While the whole country was fixated on the Ayodhya verdict, the politicians' fake protests outside Parliament.
What happened inside?
Inside, away from the cameras, with exactly the minimum number of MPs needed, the finance bill was passed. Section 236, subtly buried among 21 amendments, exempted political parties from foreign funding restrictions. How? By retroactively changing the effective date from 26 September 2010 back to 5 August 1976.
Backdated by decade.
Decades. This single, almost invisible change effectively legalized 40 years of money laundering.
40 years.
And allowed uncapped, anonymous, legal, and tax-free foreign funds, money acquired from these very land deals and scams, to pour directly into political party accounts, converting their black money into perfectly legitimate white money.
It's an incredibly sophisticated and deeply cynical maneuver. It really forces you to ask, how can citizens possibly prevent this kind of coordinated multi-year manipulation when the very institutions meant to inform and protect them are either complicit or just completely distracted? The author reveals this bill was passed without a single line of debate, allowing national parties to escape a 2014 Delhi High Court judgment that had found them guilty of violating the Foreign Contribution Act.
So they just wiped the slate clean retroactively.
Exactly. The author's stark conclusion is that political parties across the spectrum, across religions, came together and brought back black money like they promised. But here's the crucial twist. Except, now it is white and in their bank accounts. It's chillingly effective, deeply corrupt political alchemy.
So bringing all this together, what's the big takeaway here as the author sees it for you, this citizen listening? He concludes with this truly chilling observation, but you keep voting on religion.
Oof, lands hard.
Yeah. It's a powerful indictment of a system where citizens are deliberately distracted by emotional, often divisive issues, while real, profound legislative changes happen behind the scenes, consolidating immense power and wealth for the political and business elite, all under the cloak of manufactured chaos. It's a masterclass in how to manage a nation of idiots for your own benefit. Finally, we turn to the news machine, a system the author describes as nothing less than a kayfabe spectacle.
Kayfabe. Like in wrestling.
Exactly like in wrestling.
Yeah.
He recounts his personal experience during the 2008 Melbourne attacks on Indian students. Indian news reported them as racially motivated, causing widespread panic and outrage back home, but his actual experience on the ground revealed isolated muggings, assaults, yes, but not coordinated racial attacks.
So the narrative was wrong.
Completely divergent from the reality he saw. His mother called him in a panic. He checked local Aussie newspapers, found only a small report about a single mugging. The media narrative being pushed in India was totally different.
And this is where his friend Lava, a news editor, introduces that concept, kayfabe, to present staged events as real. Just like pro wrestling, where rivalries and outcomes are rigged for entertainment, Lava explains news channels spend millions promoting hero anchors, fearless truth hunters, meticulously building narratives around them.
The star anchor phenomenon.
Right. These anchors often appear thrice on a single screen, surrounded by 12 experts, making it look like a Bollywood film where the hero is alone and fighting against the odds. Viewers are then subtly, effectively convinced to follow blindly, to believe without needing proof. Just like those initial unverified claims of racial attacks in Melbourne, it's a constructed reality, designed purely to elicit a specific emotional response.
And it's not just the anchors, is it? It's the whole system.
Exactly. Lava points out that provocative headlines, dramatic responses, they're meticulously designed to turn viewers into participants. Just like the author joining that jam sandwich protest in Melbourne, swept up in the manufactured hysteria.
Right, he had sucked in.
Yeah. News channels, Lava reveals, use viewer responses, specifically TRPs, television rating points, to figure out what people like to watch, even if it has little connection to the truth. He candidly reveals that more Chinese, Southeast Asian, even Australian students were mugged in Melbourne then. But Indian students were deliberately overrepresented in crimes by the news to fuel a specific sensational narrative. Because, as Lava puts it, isolated facts serve as the truth for a news channel, as long as it fits their agenda.
And the chaos, the noise, the shouting, Lava says that's entirely by design.
It serves a purpose.
Absolutely. News channels prioritize being first to report, and they profit immensely from the crisis, even as the author saw, escalating racial tensions. Why? Because crucially, the consequences don't affect them.
Their main concern is who brings the news first, not the integrity, accuracy, or real-world impact of that news.
This constant loudness, this discomfort, it ensures constant engagement, prevents viewers from pausing, thinking critically, realizing that the channels have compromised on integrity and due diligence.
It's a business model built purely on sensationalism and distraction.
So, wrapping this section up, what's the big implication for us, the audience, from this deep dive into the news machine?
The author concludes that most of the over 400 news channels in our country are either owned by politicians, their families, their donors, or they have a political power broker on their board.
That's a huge conflict of interest.
Massive. It means they inherently manufacture and propagate news, transforming hero anchors into skilled propagandists, actively escalating tensions for profit rather than truthfully informing the public. The news machine becomes this powerful tool for manipulation, effectively breaking the news in their obsessive, profitable quest just for breaking it first.
Okay, so after exposing all these facets of idiocy woven through economics, culture, gender, politics, media, the book culminates in a citizen's manual, How to Diffuse an Idiot.
Right, the practical advice part.
Exactly. The author states the book's purpose isn't just to teach you more facts. It's to make you profoundly aware, to help you identify an idiot in your daily life. Because, he says, they are loud and vocal like news anchors, creating this illusion that they're everywhere, dominating every conversation.
And he categorizes them quite precisely. It's useful. First, the religious idiot. Blind devotion. Unshakable belief in one unbelievable story, like a godman's total superiority no matter how illogical. Second, the gullible idiot. Easily swayed by the louder lot, takes commercial news, for example, as the ultimate unquestionable truth. Third, and maybe the most common, the good idiot. Their ignorance is the only flaw. They confuse law and religion, believe a woman must take her husband's last name without question, that sort of thing. And finally, the arrogant idiot. Loud, blunt, near unredeemable, he says. Like those who hit the streets just because a political party calls a protest, without understanding why.
Now, when it comes to diffusing most of these idiots, the religious, the gullible, the good, the author explains that idiocy itself is reluctant to listen to logic or reason.
They don't want to hear your side.
Not really. They're rarely interested in your counterarguments. However, and this is key, they would like others to listen to their reasons and their logic. They want to broadcast, not discuss.
So, the method he suggests for diffusing them, it's ingeniously simple. Give them a question to answer, a simple, obvious question. Malky, this doesn't necessarily cure them overnight, but it does two crucial things. First, it makes you sure of your own position, solidifies your thinking. Second, and maybe more powerfully, it makes them hear what they just said aloud in their own voice, often forcing a moment of self-reflection, a pause, which can sometimes be a powerful, if uncomfortable, trigger for critical thought. It shifts the burden of proof back onto them.
Diffusing the arrogant idiot, though, that's a different challenge entirely. But the author says it can be wildly satisfying.
Chuckles. Okay, how do you do that?
He tells a story about watching a newly married man at a cafe brunch, boasting really loudly about how he always pays the bill, making a big show of it, only for his new wife to calmly cut in with, "I don't understand. You can take money from my parents, but you can't let me pay for a lunch?"
Ooh. Simple, direct, devastating.
Exactly.
The silence that followed, the author notes, was the unmistakable sound of an arrogant idiot being diffused. They operate assuming they've gotten away with it, right? Believing their hypocrisy or self-serving actions won't be challenged. So a question that catches them in the act or subtly shames them by exposing the sheer illogic of their position can diffuse them instantly. It just pulls back the curtain on their self-importance, forces them to confront the glaring contradiction, often publicly, which, for an arrogant idiot, is a truly potent weapon.
But what about the out-of-reach idiot? You know, the ones you can't talk to directly. Politicians on stages shouting down from podiums, newsreaders screaming from screens, shaping narratives from afar.
Yeah, you can't ask them a question directly.
Right. And the pervasive threat of the nation of idiots often comes from its ability to recruit millions, subtly pulling us back from progress, from critical thought.
The author's solution for these out-of-reach idiots is both simple and, actually, profoundly empowering. Shut them out.
Just ignore them.
More than ignore. Don't contribute to their popularity, their business model, their net worth. Don't vote for them. Don't watch their fabricated news. Don't buy the products advertised on Channel's peddling division. Don't consume films promoting fairness creams that push problematic ideals. He fundamentally believes that if you shut them out and they will listen, because it directly hits their power, their profits.
Starve them of attention and money.
Exactly. It's an act of collective refusal, a silent rebellion that hits them where it hurts most.
The author reflects, quite sadly, that communities often shield idiots because of this misplaced tribal loyalty. He might be an idiot, but he is still one of ours, our own.
Protecting their own, even when they're wrong.
Yeah. This collective protection, this refusal to challenge one of their own, leads to communities where marriage brokers openly sell male heirs, where brides are showcased with dowry demands, where names are changed after marriage as a symbol of absorption, not partnership. He asks this really probing question. Is this why we marry within our communities? So no one questions when we lay out our demands, so no one challenges us.
That really forces you to consider, if we, as a society, shield idiocy, what does that ultimately make us? The author's own personal journey, as he shares it, involved initially accepting those covers at weddings, following cultural rules without question, voting blindly, until a turning point. He realized, I asked the questions that others could not answer convincingly.
That questioning habit came back.
It did. Through that process, he began his journey to becoming a recovering idiot, as he puts it, emphasizing the profound importance of awareness of the smaller things with the bigger consequences, and critically, the courage to accept the idiot cap. That humility to admit where you've been blind or complicit. It's a journey of self-reflection, challenging ingrained norms, and finding the courage to step outside the collective comfort of just going along with things.
So bringing all these different threads together now, What does this deep dive into a nation of idiots really mean for you, our listener? It reveals, with pretty stark clarity, how deeply embedded irrational beliefs, pervasive social pressures, cunning political games, and manipulative media are in shaping our lives, our choices, our collective reality.
Yeah, it connects a lot of dots.
It does. From the incredibly personal choice of a name right up to the grand scale of national policy, how we see ourselves, how we see others. The threads of what the author calls idiocy are subtly but profoundly woven through everything, often unnoticed, really, until we choose to look closer, to truly see.
And this brings us to a crucial question for you, the listener.
Yeah.
The author makes a really compelling case that the journey from being an idiot, maybe an unwitting one, to becoming an engaged, thoughtful citizen, it's actually a remarkably short journey. But it requires a fundamental willingness to actually take that step. So the question is, are you willing to ask that first uncomfortable question to yourself, to your community, to those in power around you, even when it challenges deeply held beliefs or makes you stand out from the crowd?
Think of it like this, maybe. An idiot sleeps with a full bladder, too unwilling to get up and relieve themselves.
Chuckles slightly. Okay, interesting analogy.
Right, they can't sleep soundly, they're restless, uncomfortable, but the sheer effort of getting up seems huge, almost impossible. But once you make that decision, once you choose to act, the relief is instant, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not about finding all the perfect answers right away, but about having the courage to ask the initial questions, to challenge the unquestioned. That very first question, that single act of curiosity and courage that can truly transform you from an unwitting participant in a nation of idiots into an active, aware citizen.